Welcome to the bright side of the moon, a journey of magic and wonder, and most of all, beauty.
Chapter 17. My Early Childhood. Daddy hides us away. I sat looking out from the lead-light windows of Woodley, holding little baby Alice close to my breast, feeding her. I pondered my own beginning. Memories of those earlier years in Philadelphia returned with the reality of now being a mom. As children, we would often play in the streets playing tag with other children. And in the summer, the city fire department would open the fire hydrants on the holiday weekends so that we could cool down and frolic in the water. One particular morning, I had my toys out on the sidewalk and was pretending to cook dinner for my girlfriend, who lived next door. I didn't hear my mother calling me from inside, despite the fact we always left our doors open in those days. "Charlie, Charlie, come here, please." Charlie was my name at home. My father's name was Charles Hassenbein. He was part of a large German family that migrated to the U.S. several generations ago. My mother's maiden name was Virginia Collins. Both my mother's mother and my father's mother had the same name, Virginia. Both his father and grandfather's name was Charles. Names seemed to pass down the family tree from one generation to the next. However, my parents had different ideas about that. They made an agreement that this would not be the case for their children. But when it came time to name their first grandchild, my father's parents demanded that I should be called Virginia. If not, they would not allow my Catholic baptism to take place. My grandparents were Protestant, and the power of their word was so strong that my father gave in to them. Consequently, my mother took a stand later, for her priority was first for me to be under the protection of Christ as a Catholic. After the baptism, she proceeded to call me Charlie Ann, in which my family on both sides continue to use to this day, though they are trying to use the name Ginger, but I don't know, even for me, it's a bit strange. On that morning, Mom came out of the house looking rather tense. "Charlie, did you not hear me?" she shouted. "Pick up your toys and get in here now. We are going to visit your Aunt Dot, and do not tell anyone." My girlfriend had returned outside when she asked what I was doing. I tried not to answer, for I was an extremely obedient child down to the letter. I bit my lip. I was only 5 years old. The next thing I remember was my mother hustling my younger sister Donna and I out the door like little ducklings. We rushed down the street behind our mom, trying to catch a cab to the train station, bags and all. Mom then bought the tickets and hurried us to the platform so as not to miss the train. It seemed exciting yet unexpected. I loved Aunt Dot as we had visited her before. Daddy often drove us up to her house in Connecticut for the odd holiday. It was a sunny day, and I sat next to the window of the train, feeling its warmth, daydreaming. Donna was sitting on Mom's lap. We had stopped at another station when I suddenly heard my father's voice. "Where are you going?" Thereupon he picked up Donna, yanking me with his other hand where I sat. My mother was so caught off guard. Everything happened so quickly. He was supposed to be at work. She grabbed my other hand as he dragged me across her lap. I became the center of a tug of war. All the passengers gawked in suspended animation, wondering what's going on. All were shocked into silence and non-action. My mother lost her grip as he took us down the coach. I can still hear her feeble cry pleading to him, "Please, please don't take them away. Please don't take them away." We left the train just as the doors closed. It was over. Daddy hid us in New Jersey countryside with his parents in their newly built house, and I forgot that I had a mother. Our life became a process of baking apple pie, river cake, and making jam filled the time with our grandparents. Nanan's kitchen was large, with a pine table in the center. She was like the perfect image of a fairy godmother, bonny, gray-haired, and a smile that warmed your heart. Her apron always covered with flour or some sauce she had been making for dinner. Her pantry was a child's delight, full of preserves, chutneys, and jams. Herbs hung from the ceiling and filled the room with drifting fragrances, which held me spellbound each time I entered to fetch something for her. Pop-Up, my grandfather, was a welder and worked from home in his garage. His white t-shirts always covered with little holes from the sparks. He never shaved, and with his prickly beard he chased and teased us without mercy. When he finally caught us, he would rub his whiskers across our faces as he held us in his arms. We squealed with glee as he continued to tickle us. It was such a fun game, which we played often in the gravel driveway. My father's sister, Aunt Dolly, had two children. Both were boys, Tommy, called Butchie, and Billy, who came to live with us. Story has it that their father wanted girls and my father wanted boys, so we all wound up being placed with our grandparents. Really didn't matter though, because our grandparents showed us so much love. My grandparents' house was like a fairyland haven for me. Nanan collected salt and pepper shakers that adorned her living room windowsill. She would often sit and crochet another doily or tablecloth in her big armchair by the window. She taught me how to do the same and knit. My grandfather had a clock that hung on the wall, a fairly a family heirloom from the old country that had a cuckoo that cuckooed on the hour. Pop-Up would rewind it each evening by pulling the metal pine cones on the chains that dangled from the main part of the clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock echoed throughout the house. Each morning, Butchie and Billy and I would go out into the pine woods and collect blueberries for our morning cornflakes. Donna was too young to go with us, so she sat by the window with her head in her hands, grumpy, until we returned. Donna and I wore the exact same crinoline dresses that I found out years later were actually from my mother. She must have sent them to their old address in Philly, for she did not know where we were. Daddy must have passed them on to our grandparents secretively, but I must say they were really pretty. One afternoon, as we were playing in the dust near the main house, a little powdered blue car drove up the driveway. A man came out saying he was a Fuller Brushman. Fuller Brushmen were door to door salesmen in America selling merchandise for the home. My grandmother stood listening as we all gathered behind her skirt like little ducklings. Papa was out on an errand, and we were the only ones home. We were curious who this stranger was and listened from behind Nanan's skirt, peeking out occasionally. When suddenly a woman with dark hair and eyes sat up from where she had been secretively lying on the back seat out of sight. In almost the same motion, she opened the door and got out. My gran tensed as I ran out to this woman. She was beautiful, and I asked, "Who are you?" And she replied, "Why, Charlie, I'm your mother." "Oh, really? Would you like to come in and see my toys?" I asked as I grabbed her hand. At that moment, my grandmother grabbed my other hand, shouting at my mother to go away while at the same time demanding that we all go inside. The Fuller Brushman called out to my mother, "Ginny, come on. We know where they are now." She let go of my hand reluctantly with tears in her eyes as she got back into the little blue car. Gran held me close, wrapping me safely in her arms, also with tears in her eyes. I was confused, but returned to play with the others as I watched the car disappear down the drive, leaving a trail of dust. I have very special memories about my time with my Nana and Papa. Christmas, particularly. They weren't very rich, but every Christmas season they would take out a loan and fill their large living room with incredible presents, especially when the four of us were living with them, being little kids. They themselves had a family of 8 children and growing grandchildren. But I'll never forget this Christmas. One whole wall was full of wrapped presents to the ceiling. Then there were a car. There was Mary Had a Little Lamb, life size. Just everything us four could ever had dreamt to have. And it was a miracle in some ways. And I think it really helped us get over the time being separated from our parents. It didn't seem to matter at the time. I had forgotten that I had a mother, and my dad was in Philly most of the time working. So there we were, the four of us with our Nanan and Papa. I don't remember how long it was since my mother found us, before my dad was sent a summons to appear in court to discuss custody of Donna and I remember the Hall of Justice being this enormous building with pillars of marble and wooden benches. I felt very small, but Donna and I sat there and held each other's hands. We were then called to go in and be in the judge's chambers. And my dad whispered to us and said, "Don't say anything about Agnes," because he had a girlfriend by then. Then we got in there, and this room was just completely wood, shelves, books, carpeting, huge desk, and a very, very smiling gentleman in his judge's robes came up to us and asked us a few questions, and the only one I now remember is him saying, "Does your dad have a girlfriend?" And I shook my head, but Donna, being we, said, "Yes, her name's Agnes." I kicked her, as you can imagine. I was really upset with her for selling out our dad. But she wouldn't know, she was just little. In the end, we had to go and be with my mum. And the train journey to Connecticut was not really a happy experience, because to me, my mum was a stranger, even though she had Aunt Dot with her and another girlfriend. But they were strangers. So there I was, hugging my dad's leg when they were saying, "Charlie, you have to go with your mom." She wasn't my mom. It took me a long time to be able to open my heart to her. And my dad went home alone. We weren't there anymore. It's been quite a process to work through, because I have an ability, or did have an ability, to suppress my memories. So I forgot my mom. And then the tragedy of losing my dad, I suppressed too. A lot of good has come my way, and I'm grateful to my life. So here we go into the next phase, chapter 18. See you soon. Thank you. Bye.